Today, what we're going to do, welcome everybody. Good to see everybody interested in what Ellermitz Realty has to say about contracts. But what we wanted to do today, honestly, was compare and make sure that everybody is filling these in the way we think is the best way to do them. But we always need to think when we do the contracts. Well, number one, we need to stop and think before we write a contract, right? You don't just, a lot of people, I think, just dive in and start writing, and it's like, well, wait a minute. Let's draft a few things out on a napkin or a paper towel or something first and have a thought process of how we're going to do this. So we talk to our buyer, and if we're with them, bring a hard copy. We're all trying to do so much electronically now, but hard copy works beautifully. And if you're sitting there working with somebody and they get to do it on the spot, a lot of people are like, you can do it that way? It's like, yeah, absolutely. And other people are, the older folks are like, you can do it electronically, just click. But anyway, the reason I say that
Would
is,
you scan those and send it in, or would you just use that as your template to actually do it electronically? When would they sign?
no, if they sign it, it's a contract, it's an offer, it's a purchase offer.
So then
Right.
you would scan it.
I would scan it and load it in. Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And then send it off through app file still. But at least you have everything in writing. Because here's the other thing, anything that is handwritten on a contract takes precedence over anything that's typewritten in a contract. Is that not an interesting thought?
Yeah.
So, but it's important to know. So, you know, if you've got a buyer that decides they want to change the land contract and start drawing lines through things and saying, can we do it this way or that way? I brought that up for a specific reason, but the fact of the matter is we have attorneys that decide they're going to just change the FAR, which is a Florida Bar Association written contracts that all we're allowed to do is fill the blanks in on. We're not allowed to modify them. We're allowed to do addendums, but we're not attorneys. So if an attorney claims that, hey, this makes it better for you, that's fine. Put the attorney's name on that addendum and send it out, and make sure and send a copy of that to that attorney because his name's on it or their name's on it, whoever it may be, right? But the fact of the matter is, if they're advising a buyer or seller, they need to put their name on whatever they're advising them to do. Otherwise, what good is it? Because they'll deny it in a court of law 9 times out of 10. They'll say, I might have mentioned that in passing, but we never really discussed these things. Important items to think about, okay? It's going to take long enough to get through, but buyers and sellers, obvious. Property address, obvious. You know, the thing is, of course, legal descriptions. You've got a printout of the MLS with you if you're doing this in person. Use what's on that, and you can even state that it's from the MLS. And of course, you want to go back and double check against court or the county records to make sure that it's correct, because you may need to tweak that.
When you say that on the back end, would you use dash from MLS?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. And otherwise, if you find it wrong, just draw lines through it, put the correct one in, and have your buyer initial it and send it back out, right? But the fact of the matter is, a purchase offer is just a purchase offer. It's just an offer. It's not an accepted contract. It's just a purchase offer to start with. If there, and we want it as accurate as possible. If it has issues, things that aren't quite correct, you clean them up. But the real reason for buyers and sellers to signing a contract, number one, obviously, is they're in a contract. But number two is it's simply a meeting of the minds. A meeting of the minds can be verbal. A lot of people don't know that a verbal contract is also binding. But a lot of people in our day and age deny that, and they say verbal schmerble. Okay, I agree, but we had an agreement, and you know, the fact of the matter is, growing up in my day and age, an agreement was a handshake oftentimes. And actually, that's how we're leasing property again down in the Keys this year. But it just depends on the people, right? We leased our business offices for 10 years on a handshake, and it's just, it needs to be an honorable thing, but it is a meeting of the minds. So we're trying to get a meeting of the minds in writing by doing this, right? So again, purchase price goes in. That's simple. How much escrow is going to be held? What's that going to be? Never make it a company's. If you make it a company's, guess what it has to do? You have to accompany whenever this is executed. That goes in now. Well, let's back up. If it's not even executed,
Mhm.
that has to be turned in within how many days?
But this,
Yeah, it's depending on what you put, but technically a company is it.
Now, if it accompanies, how many days before it has to go into whoever's holding escrow?
Same day.
1 day. It needs to be in there. So that's really important stuff. And the pain in the neck about that is it doesn't get accepted. Now that check's in with the escrow company. Now that person decides they don't want to buy a home after all. Now that those funds, no escrow deposit company is going to just cut them a check back. No, that has to fully clear. Their system has to tell them that it's cleared. Then they'll cut a check back. Plan on 10 days. And so it creates a fiasco that doesn't need to be. If you have a meeting of the minds ahead of time, sure. Okay. So in other words, when I bought my house, this last house I bought, my escrow deposit, significant amount, accompanied the offer. I had my inspections done before he would even sign my purchase offer. I had to do everything before he would execute anything. So I had to have skin in the game well ahead of time. And so when we wrote the offer and it went into the escrow company or the attorney, everything was already done.
Yeah, you were already kind of checked all the boxes.
And that is not an illegal move by anybody either. But a lot of buyers are like, what? You want me to spend money before I even get in the contract? Yeah, he did, because he's like, you're not going to tie me up if this isn't going to work. And it wasn't even on the market. But anyway, those things. So escrow agent, you can put a TBD. So if you have a buyer and your buyer's not going to pick and pay, can the buyer still put in the escrow agent that they want to hold their escrow? Sure. Absolutely. What's the pain in the neck about that if the seller picks another escrow agent?
to go back and fix it, it's a cost.
No, they can pick it, but that's where it's not escrow, I'm sorry, where the closing is going to happen. Escrow is determined here. So we're right. So I'm dealing with that right now. I have a closing the end of the week, and the escrow is being held in West Palm at their attorney, and it just got released to be wired over to well, Dunlap Moran that we use quite a bit.
So would you technically put that in the additional terms or an addendum if the seller wanted it? How would you proceed with that?
If the seller wanted it clear,
Or a different title compared to the escrow?
doesn't really matter. But
Okay.
what's going to happen is this: whoever you put in here as the escrow agent is going to, if they catch wind of it, they're going to be calling and acting like, hey, we're closing this. And it's like, no, you're not. You're just holding an escrow. So again, if you're the buyer's agent in this scenario, and this is going on, or let's back up. It's easier to go down this trail. If you're the listing agent and the buyer has selected who's holding escrow, but yet seller's picking and paying, all right? And you get a call from this escrow agent saying, hey, we're closing this file. Just want to, no, slow down. I can appreciate the fact that the buyer side of this transaction provided this documentation to you. However, you're not doing the closing on it. The seller was picking and paying, and here's who they chose. So we'll let you know as things proceed so that you can have the escrow wired over to this firm. Okay, and you could put it in additional terms if you chose to. I don't know that you need to.
Really?
Because that's not what this part's about.
Yeah, because I know that this technically is escrow and everyone kind of just
It's just
almost just says, hey, whoever has escrow.
it's just
you know,
escrow.
close it.
Now, could you put an email, and should you put an email to everybody? Here's the closing agent for this that was selected by the seller. Yes. If they want an additional addendum indicating that, could you do that? Absolutely. Should you? Probably.
Yeah.
It just clarifies things. Okay. So, and that's what I would do. And that's what I do. So, and oh, I said do. Anyway, all you guys at the same time. That's right. So additional deposits. If there is none, put zeros. Don't leave blanks. Zero. Deposit paid, be paid collectively is referred to as deposit. this is something that we do need to know, but you already put your escrow deposit, so probably zero. Financing. You can either put it as, this is the simple stuff, right? And you can use the auto sum feature with these in our system as well. But these are simply a matter of if it's an 80-20, 80-20, if it's a 95, 95. If it's a 95, I prefer to put the dollar amount because people aren't, it doesn't call out to the forefront to a seller that, oh gee, it's kind of a weak buyer, isn't it? So if someone's well-to-do and someone else is trying to buy their home and only put down 3 to 5%, a lot of sellers are like, I don't have a lot of confidence in this. Isn't anybody else interested in my house? So if you've got multiple offers, as we've gone through before, most likely they're going to pick a different one. My favorite line, of course, in this day and age again is, it's the best offer we've got. Do you want to give it a shot for 30 days if that's the closing term? If not, that's fine. We can keep marketing. But, anyhow, and then of course you want to call that always part of our duties here. Call whoever is doing the financing, call that lender, make sure you know what's going on and verify the lenders who they say they are.
Yep.
Details,
Check
right?
their-
Right,
and
Joey?
their NL, whatever it is, not MLS. I think.
Oh, what did I skip?
Skipped line.
Okay. So guys, right here again, we're going to, of course, this is the balance. This is amount that is closed. We don't know what all those other prepaids and things are. What we know is just simply what's here. So that's what we call out here. Will that change? Absolutely. Because it's going to include other closing costs, prepaids, all of their things are things that need to come to the closing table, right? Time for acceptance. It depends. How long does somebody want to give for acceptance? If you get into a contract situation, I know these are going to take me a little bit to get through again, guys, but here, what we want to do is be sure that if in the MLS, it points out that, hey, it's, say it's a probate deal. Well, or it's a probate deal. It has to go through the court. They may need 14 days. Okay, I'll give you 14 days, but in realtor only remarks, can you say that contract is verbally accepted or purchase offer is verbally accepted, awaiting court signatures?
Yeah.
What's wrong with asking them to plug it in there so that as they get other offers, they can say, yes, but this one's already in their system.
So technically, would they switch it to pending or no?
No. Nope, because you don't have a contract.
Yeah.
Now, can somebody leave something pending and has a contract that isn't a strong contract and has a backups requested? A lot of people think that that means you can leave it pending. No, it's black and white. You either have a contract or you don't. And when you see that or you hear that, you need to report that as a violation through the MLS so it gets switched to pending. It's just wrong. And people aren't being trained properly.
I just want to clarify. since
Yes.
it's Agents, on line 42 for balance to close, it is totally acceptable. We just put balance.
Oh, balance, the word balance. Yeah, I love the word balance. Thank you, Leah. That's exactly right.
Be aware that if you do have it on auto, it will delete it a couple times.
Mhm.
So be aware of that.
Sure. And then we need a closing date. That is a actual closing date. Some people have tried to put to be determined and it's like, no, we need a closing date. And just like if it has to be through probate, they'll try and put to be determined. No, because you have an open-ended contract offer. Terrible idea. Have a date and you might have to do an extension. All right.
What's the best thing in the world to do for a closing date? I learned this from Ann.
Honor before.
So you
Yeah.
don't have to write up an addendum.
Yep. Well, and that's again, if it's on or before that date, not on or after.
Mhm,
Right.
Right.
All right.
On or after that,
Yeah.
soon enough, one day.
But for sure, on or before is
Correct. You've been doing on.
doing on.
I do that
so-
too.
so you're right. And I think that's the way we have it in the system, is on or before.
Yeah, if it was
Um,
on one day, it'll be
Because
on.
guys, we have these in our app files, the way we like to see them filled out. We're just going back through it so we explain why they're filled out that way, right? Property subject to lease or occupancy after closing. There are home sellers that go, hey, I'll sell it to them, but I want 10 days after closing to move out. That's not an unreasonable request, except for the fact that what are they going to take with them? Now, how do you do a final walkthrough? Are the funds held in escrow until that time period? You know that you can do that. You can have the closing agent and things written up in an addendum if they require this, that's fine. But all proceeds are escrowed for that 10 days. And they'll be like, but I'm closing on another house. Well, then you need to be out. Or you need to,
Or
There's-
20%.
it's always an or,
30%
always an
sell
or,
price.
yeah, always an or. And or it depends. Because every situation's different, as you'll find as you do more of these contracts, everyone. So assignability may assign and thereby be released from any liability. This is typically selected by a firm that is buying a property on paper, reselling it to someone else, making money on the paper in between and never taking ownership of the property.
Yep.
It's legal.
Also,
It's wholesaling. Yep. Many or may assign but not be released. So this one is, that's okay. Because it may be assigned to somebody else. They may sell it to somebody else. Okay, but they still have to close on the property. So then they would do back to back if it was a wholesaler. Wholesalers aren't going to select this one. Well, who will select this one is someone who's buying it in their name and knows that they want to put it in a trust but don't have the trust completed yet, things like that.
Yeah.
So if that one's selected, I always call and ask why.
Yep.
And I've had people go, well, I'm trained to do it that way. Why? And so my favorite is may not assign. And because if you do this one, that's okay. If the name changes to a whatever, a trust, yeah, whatever it may be, go back and do an addendum. That's easy enough too. So what we're saying is that these are written in stone, but just because they're written in stone in this contract, because it's written by an attorney, doesn't mean we can't make modifications as we go. And most people are reasonable in this time period. They want to sell a home. Buyer wants to buy a home, seller wants to sell a home. Financing. This is easy, right? All cash. That's all our buyers. Done. Don't have to do anything else. We're moving forward. Get your inspections done.
What lending?
Yeah, and then there is contract is contingent upon. Guys, you got to fill these out. You're failing if you don't. And here's why. Contingent upon approval within 30 days. If you look at this and you've got a closing in 30 days, you go, ouch. So if financing isn't completed within the total contract time, they can still walk away and get their money back. If the buyer has done everything in on their side to make sure that this is done and something blows up, they get their money back. It's just the way it works. Conventional, FHA, VA, USDA, whatever it may be. Okay. Native American loans. Yep. We need to put that item in here. And this is the most important thing ever. An initial interest rate not to exceed, boom. Because you can go to a hard money lender. The folks can't get the loan, they got denied. Well, my hard money lender will loan it to them. And yeah, it's a 20% interest rate, but you didn't select anything and they can get financed. All of a sudden their deposits at risk.
Yeah.
Because somebody didn't know to fill in, it's not going to exceed 8.5%. Okay, make sure we do it in term of the loan, those things, fill them in, guys. Don't leave blanks. Even if you put a dash through it, try not to leave blanks. Even here, where it says 5 days if left blank, put 5.
Yeah.
Because fact of the matter is, I've had the issue before where a selling agent tried to put a time period in there. Nobody initialed it and they sent it through and had their seller sign it and send it back. And it's like, no, that's not what we offered. And
But some agents will completely miss it. They'll just see signed signatures.
and
move
send it
forward.
through.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
I even put dashes through that, even if it's a cash offer now.
Sure.
I just don't, people are just.
I
people,
agree.
No.
I agree. And it's trust but verify and help keep them honest. A lot of these things I'm not going to go through because it is standard verbiage in these contracts, but you're doing yourself an injustice if you don't read entire contracts because things will stick out to you. Highlight things you don't get and ask me, please. And if I don't get it, even better, because it means I've got to sharpen up my skills too. And I've got to ask, and I'll call the attorneys and say, hey, I guess I don't understand this as well as I thought I did. And exactly. So, this is buyer fails, whatever buyer fails to do. But assumption of an existing mortgage, that's another option. And it's more of an option now because with a VA mortgage, a lot of people don't realize you can get a VA mortgage from somebody who has a VA mortgage.
They have a
You-
3.5%.
You can assume that, and then you do a wraparound on the remainder and you have a better rate.
So technically, that is still in the same line as the financing. It's just underneath all of the financing. And
It's
they're
in-
just simple checkboxes with no other explanation.
Yep, it's in the financing section.
Yeah, cause that's something. like, I
Purchase
see that
money
all the
note,
time.
yep,
For some
mortgage to
reason, I think
seller.
It's in like a different spot.
So you,
So-
and then you've got to use the appropriate riders with them, right?
Okay, yeah, that's
Okay.
something I've yet to have to do, but I've always been, I've seen
Okay.
that, I'm like,
But what
Wonderful.
some people do, Joey, is they'll send the rider, but they don't select it that it attaches here. If it's still with the package and it's executed by everybody, they should be safe, but why risk that? Why would we not say,
Well,
hey,
what would
here
you
it is?
check Then too, like what would you check at the top? Like in reality, would they still check financing?
Financing.
Okay.
This is
okay,
finance.
Okay, so you
because-
check financing, but then instead of checking.
It can be owner finance. It's still financing.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
Okay? That answer that?
Mhm,
All
yeah,
right.
Yeah, that's something I've
So,
never.
But again, if we go back up, financing, this is all in the financing paragraph.
So would
okay.
you even check off in the would you check? Well, so this was kind of confusing. It has A, B, and then it's C, D.
Hmm.
So technically, if you are doing the assumption of an existing mortgage, I don't need to check anything near the conventional FHA. I don't need it. I need to obviously get rid of blanks. I
Mhm.
don't need to check anything up there.
Mhm.
The only thing I'm checking would be
Down below.
down below. Okay.
Yep.
That's what I was like, okay, so is there like
Yep.
a B and then a sub-con like?
Not that,
Yeah. like,
Yeah,
That's right.
not that I'm aware of like that. I don't believe it works that way.
Like to
I
say
think
one
you
will
either
be-
pick A, B, C, or D.
Okay.
Okay,
It's not like-
and, but again, those are things that when, it rolls into this, you want to make sure and run these things past our attorneys anyway that we work with to make sure that it's done properly
Yeah.
and that there aren't any question marks or easy ways for a buyer to just walk away or a seller to take their deposit. We really don't want to help sellers take people's deposits. Our goal is to help people get homes, sellers to sell homes. And most sellers aren't after a deposit anyway, they just want the home sold, but they get their, they get their knickers in a knot and get upset about something. All of a sudden, well, I want their deposit. It's like, yeah, you don't deserve it. People hate it when I tell them that. Well, you don't deserve it according to the contract. And I can show you where. And then, sometimes that leads to, you're fired. Well, you can do that. But anyway, closing costs, fees, and charges. This outlines it. Other, what if there are other fees? Will we not write them right here? Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, if that is being charged to the seller, right? If it's being charged to the buyer, you could put it here so that there aren't surprises. Okay, even though here it talks about survey and elevation certificate required. Up here, okay, you got that on typically it's paid for by the buyer. But if the seller has it and they say it's good, put it up here. If they sign it, they're saying they're picking and paying a survey and they have one. And if they're wrong, they're still paying for a survey. And that is just the way it should be. Title evidence insurance, just 15 days, just fill it in or less. How about this part?
I've started, if I had buyers, remember, I think it was our last training, talking about buyers commissions.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
if, you have the buyers paying for the agent's commissions or something like that. And then we have a agreement, but I also throw it in right above there where it talks about the things, like 155, yeah, and closing costs, 155.
Oh, up here. Mhm.
154. I throw it there too.
Why wouldn't you?
So,
That's smart.
Buyer to pay and then other
Mhm.
buyer's agent 1.5% or something like that as
Yep.
well. And then most of the time I'll throw it in the bottom as like in the additional terms too, if need be.
Well, the other thing you could put here is buyer commission agreement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, instead of being very exact on what percentage.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
include
didn't
it.
think about that.
Okay, so everybody doesn't need to see that.
Yeah, not what you're
mhm.
getting out of it, yeah.
Doesn't, that doesn't pertain to a seller. What would a seller care if your buyer's paying you 5%? Some of them might want to know because you don't deserve that. It's, people are silly. It's really weird how people want to get in. Some people want to get into every nook and cranny of things where their nose doesn't belong. And I've had to tell attorneys this. If they're representing a buyer and I'm working for the seller and they want to know my commission. I'm like, well, you can look in the MLS. It's right there. Here, I'll send you a copy.
Mhm,
Well, can't you just tell me? It's none of your business.
mhm.
And have them go, what? I always get that. And I'm like, why? You don't represent anybody I represent.
Mhm.
I represent this transaction at that point because I'm a transaction broker.
Right.
So sometimes a little pushback doesn't hurt. On the other hand, if there's no reason for you to
Right.
not disclose it, why wouldn't you tell them? I'm not there to argue. Check one. We're still in title evidence and insurance, right? Who's picking and paying?
Seller.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then, if the seller is, what I would oftentimes do with the escrow agent is then I would call the buyer's agent and say, hey, you asked for the seller to pick and pay. Do you mind if we go ahead and change the escrow agent to who's going to handle the closing for clarity's sake?
Yeah.
Some people will be like, no, they really want it to be held with their own attorney. And it's like, understood.
Yeah.
And then it's fine, but why not ask?
Mhm.
So, or buyer can pick and pay and have a great time.
Also, know this with Ann Johnson, whoever's picking and paying is who she represents.
That's absolutely right.
A lot of people don't know that. I
So,
did not know that.
if
On
you-
one that I was double ending,
Mhm.
and I actually was trying to have the buyer, the buyer wanted them to represent them, but they wanted the seller to pay for title and closing.
Doesn't work that way.
And so they did that, but Ann was like, yes, that's not what the lead is calling. That's actually,
Right.
you remember him?
Oh, yes, I do. Now go have fun with that. No, he'll do something. All right. So anyway, it is important that we make sure that we handle these things appropriately, right? So same thing with if it's Miami-Dade, we're not in Miami-Dade. We're not in the Miami-Dade region. But if we're writing in that area, which there's nothing to stop us, we need to make sure we cover these things appropriately, right? Which is, seller not obligated to pay more than whatever that amount may be for abstracts or however it's closing, okay? However they're taking title. Those are the things there, title evidence and insurance, okay? Survey, at least 5 days prior to closing. That makes me flinch and you can't change it. But this is, again, if there's an encumbrance on that property and you get it 5 days or 6 days before closing, they're still in contract. Now you got to go back to your seller and go,
Hey.
you know that part of your driveway you added? Yeah, you need to remove it.
Giant shed with the concrete slab.
Yeah, well, you need to remove it or you need to escrow 125% of that change. And it will be dispersed once that's done by the buyer then. Home warranty. It's an option, right? Buyer, seller, not applicable. Depends on the age of the home oftentimes, but some people just always want a warranty on everything, and that's okay. So we help them do it. You could always put that it's going to be by buyer because they definitely want one, to be determined. Not to exceed, you can get that out of a buyer ahead of time, right? So do you want to spend $750 or $1,000 on this? Because it will cover you in different ways. I will get those policies for you, we'll lay them out and you decide. But how much would you want to spend on that? Okay, what's that?
I've never
Never had
really
anybody
wanted
ask
to do
it.
that.
For home warranty.
Have you offered them?
I walked through it.
Okay, because it's part of our job to make sure that they know that they can get a home warranty. Because some home warranties, granted, they all have service fees and servicing fees.
Yeah.
So it's gonna cost you $125 every time somebody comes out. But if a major piece of equipment fails, like an air conditioner or a roof fails,
Mhm.
they'll cover it.
Yeah.
And that's huge. And if you don't cover that clearly, it's not a good thing. So I have a lot of folks that do home warranties. And I've used, oh gosh, 210 home warranty a lot. Old Republic's the big boy. And yeah, that's important to have. Okay, good. But again, they can use whoever they want for that. But we need to, as a part of our job, offer it. Okay, because again, warranties provide for repair replacement. This is the huge word. Many homes, major mechanical systems, built-ins, appliances, even breakdowns that are caused by normal wear and tear. They still cover them. Pool equipment, things like that. Leaks in a pool. These things are expensive. And again, especially if you've got an older home, I think that's more important, okay?
Mhm.
Special assessments. At closing, sellers will pay whatever it may be, or buyer will pay, seller will pay in full, or buyer will pay installments. It just depends. Is there any special assessment? Oftentimes, the one I typically pick here is seller will pay installments due prior to closing and buyer after. But you need to talk to, if there's an HOA, you need to call them and find out if there are any special assessments coming. These are things that we aren't just going to assume for our buyer or seller, right? We need to ask. As we roll on, coastal barrier research, okay, yeah, this is flood zones, elevation certificates. People need to know how much this will save them in their homeowner's insurance. So check these things with the insurance companies. We have them in our preferred vendors lists and use them because your insurance rates are going to go down 9 times out of 9 with an elevation certificate if you're in a flood zone. All right. And same thing with wind mit and things like that, wind mitigation inspections. It will save them money. And again, here, the Coastal Barrier Resources Act, we can pick a date. Let's put a date. And, you know, because if they can terminate, we need to know what that date is. And personally, if they're getting insurance, why couldn't we have that completed within 14 days? I don't know, but they leave it to 20 days. So a blank contract leaves it 20 days. I would back that up. All right. Same thing with home inspections and things, right? That's all negotiable. This comes down through everything from, you know, energy brochure, lead-based paint, hugely important if you have an older home, pre-78 or 78 or older. Homeowners associations, all of these things. FERPA. If it's a foreign seller or foreign buyer, we need to make sure that we handle these things properly and use those appropriate addendums, okay? The property, this is all part of the as-is inspection period. Here's the thing. This says 15 days. Oftentimes we get this to 7 days. Some people wanted 5 days because, you know, the buyer, if the buyer determines in buyer's sole discretion that the property is not acceptable to the buyer, buyer may terminate this contract by delivering written notice of such to the seller. That does take written notice. So they can't just say, hey, we're out. If you have that buyer, you've got to provide written notice to that seller and have it executed by the buyer that this is you're withdrawing. Okay. Email?
Email works.
Email could work, but why would you not use the appropriate document, which is withdrawal and cancellation? Because if you don't do that, how does the escrow agent know who to give the escrow to, right? So there's a lot of moving parts in this to keep up with on a consistent basis, but that's why we use that form. And yes, I would shoot an email and let them know that that's coming and we're working on the release and cancellation. Okay. So I know these take me time. Already 10:15. A walkthrough. Hey, Joey, close this door if you're going to be talking, brother.
Yeah.
Thank you. So as we roll through, walkthrough inspection, reinspection, horribly important and people miss it. Walkthrough inspection prior to close. If you don't go back through and at least make this offer to your buyer that they can walk through that property before they go to the closing table and it flooded the night before and they close on the property, they own the property. So then it comes down to this maintenance requirement. But again, if they sign off that they accepted it in that condition, it muddles the waters horribly. Just walk them through it. And same thing with closing out building permits, you know, seller's assistance and cooperation to use to close these out. This is a big difference in the various contracts here, guys. This portion right here in a standard contract is already dealt with ahead of time. And the buyer and seller can't just walk away. They have remedies, okay? Assign and repair treatment contracts is important as well. If they're having a termite treatment plan, they need to assign those things and transfer any warranties on roofs or whatever HVAC systems over. Escrow agent and broker. We already talked about that, but who's the escrow agent? Needs to be selected, and they're receiving the deposits, other funds, things like that. And they need to then disperse according to the conditions of the contract. So failure of funds to come to this contract. So if somebody fails to do their part of the contract, so the buyer doesn't perform, Fact of the matter is, it kills this contract. They're out of contract. They've broken the contract, but it doesn't stop them from owing those funds. It's really a mess. Professional advice, broker liability. So guys, if somebody wants to have inspections done, which they should, we ask them to seek professional advice. Guys, we're not home inspectors, even though I may have been one in the past. I may have been a general contractor. I have to be really careful because of that with what hat I wear when I'm talking with buyers on a home. You know, if they're asking me, hey, Kent, can we take this wall out? I clearly say, hey, guys, I'm not a contractor anymore. That's not the hat I wear. My licensing doesn't cover it. Let's look in the attic though, and I can give you an idea, but you should really talk to a contractor at this point for verification. I'll give you my opinion, but even that can get you in trouble. So on this, the buyers are solely relying on the professional inspectors, right? That's what we want. So be sure they do that and be sure that those things are covered properly. Same thing with, you know, should they have an attorney? Of course they should if they want one. Well, I've got a buyer right now that has an attorney separate from the attorney that's handling the closing. I do have double end on this one, but my seller was asked to pick and pay, which they did, which means that the closing firm's attorney represents them. My buyer wanted to have his escrow held in Palm Beach, and not only that, he wanted this guy to represent him. So he spent, you know, another $1,400 to just have this guy review documentation on an expensive home. Does $1,400 really hurt somebody? No. Are they more comfortable? Then they should do it. Okay. And so then it talks about if you have a dispute, how's it handled? Read these things, guys. Make sure and cover yourself. We're just filling in blanks, and I'm filling in all the blanks in between to the best of my ability here. If you have questions on these things, please ask me, because there will be more, including, you know, this talks about everything from prorations. Here's the deal too. Sitting with a buyer, they ask you to just give you your opinion on all of these items in a nutshell. You simply go, well, this talks about prorations and credits. You should read it. This section talks about access to the property and conducting things. You can read those things, but tell them then they need to read it. Risk of loss. It's important that you guys read these things, right? If it's, I'm doing a 1031 tax exchange, how do I handle that? Well, here's where it addresses that. And I can put you with the proper attorney. I typically personally use Riddell Law, and they do a nice job with the 1031 exchanges. But it is a different loop, and it has to be handled properly. And there's other addendums that you can use with 1031s, right? Recordable bound. But again, I just read that line, and it's up to them. And then a lot of people are like, yeah, enough. They get bored even with you just reading that line. Okay. And others don't want to read anything. They don't want to understand. They say, do I own the house now? No, we're in contract if the seller signs. All right. So buyer's waiver of claims. You know, this is interesting, but this is a really important part of this for us, that the extent permitted by law, buyer waives any claims against seller and against any licensed real estate. This license part is huge, involved in the negotiation of contract for damages, defects pertaining to the physical condition of the property, right? So these are important. Now, how about if it's in a homeowners association? We've attached the HOA addendum. Why the heck would this be selected? Okay. And then we were even talking about seller financing, the various things. If C up above is selected, I think it is, then you select C here. It's nice that they did this. Oh, look at that. I didn't ever realize that. C is in financing, it's a C. In mortgage assumption, it's a D under financing. We need to attach these appropriate things. If it's FHA or VA financing, that's huge. How about if there is a home sale contingency? Pretty big one, isn't it? That needs to be included here. If they don't include the home sale contingency addendum, they muddle the waters horribly. They're acting as though their buyer is a cash buyer. That buyer is only a cash buyer if their home sells. If that falls through, their escrow is at risk big time, especially if they're saying all cash and they don't have it. If they say financed, it's a terrible gray area and it's horrible because if it's financed and it's still contingent on their home selling and it doesn't sell, but that money is required to get the financing, now they can't get financing. What do you think happens to that poor seller?
They get really sad and depressed and angry. All the emotions happen because.
And they withdraw their home from the market. They fire you because you didn't do your job right and you did absolutely nothing wrong. And then they're going to fight for that escrow. And I would too. Okay. But bottom line is it's just sad. So this is where a seller can counter, or this is where you write additional terms. Okay. Additional terms can also be, what's being left at the property. Solar system to remain on the house and all controls. These are things that are important to write down. Pool, all pool equipment and cleaning supplies. All chemicals in shed behind the house.
Yeah.
If you don't, some people are going, well, there's a pool at the next house. I need those things. I'm not leaving my $1,000 pool cleaner, creepy crawler that goes around. Okay. So those are important things to write in here. Everybody initials it. Again, talks about legal stuff and letting people know that this is a legally binding contract once it's executed by everybody. And they can seek the advice of an attorney prior to signing. If they don't fully understand what we're showing them, they should seek the advice of an attorney prior to signing. That's just reality. And it protects you too. Okay. So that's the basic gist of this contract. Buyers sign, sellers sign. You don't have to put in addresses for purposes of notice. If they want to, that's fine. What we typically will do here is if it's, say it's Christopher Schutz goes in here with Ellermitz Realty. We could put that it's 3%, but if the listing office is offering 2.5%, the only thing they may ask is, where's that other 0.5% coming from? Well, in this day and age now, we know that it would be coming from the buyer, but only if you have that agreement in place. All right. Inspection, right to cancel. During this term, you either get in writing from the seller that they agree to do these repairs. It's important that they're executed before the end of this term. If you're only given 7 days, you better have your inspections done in 5 days and land that back in front of the seller on day 6 or 7 at the latest, and let them know that, hey, yeah, if you don't agree, we're withdrawing. And let me know if I need to put that in writing. And not trying to play hardball with you or anything. It's just I'm trying to meet the terms of the contract. The way I had always read this prior to talking to a few attorneys was that we had to request within that time period, but that's not right. It's not just the request. It needs to be executed, and the attorneys are saying, no, we need to make sure that it's sealed by the end of that time period.
And if they don't seal it by the end of that time period, your buyer cannot back out with their escrow.
Right. Right. So that's where you have to either kill it or go forward. I think that so many people forget about this part, which is determination. It's more important than being smart, more important than a great idea, more important than a network. So never overlook outworking others. This business requires a constant pursuit and follow-up. So be aware that you will have challenges in your business. The difference is in being successful is not failure. As an entrepreneur, it's never giving up. Your determination is required.